The my-body philosophers are completely unable to conceive of a spiritual body. They say that the spirit is always impersonal, and whenever they see something personal, they take it for granted that it is material. In Bhagavad Gita 9:11 it is said, Avajananti mamudha manushim tanumashritam parambhavama jananto mama bhutta maheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. Unintelligent people think that the Supreme Lord accepts a body composed of material energy. We can easily understand the material body, but we cannot understand the spiritual body. Therefore, Rishabhadeva says, Idam sharira mama durvibhavyam. In the spiritual world, everyone has a spiritual body. There is no conception of material existence there. In the spiritual world, there is only service and the receiving of service. There's only sevya, seva, and sevaka. The person served, the process of service, and the servant. These three items are completely spiritual, and therefore the spiritual world is called absolute. There is no tinge of material contamination there. Being completely transcendental to the material conception, Lord Rishabhadeva states that his heart is composed of dharma. Dharma is explained in Bhagavad Gita 18:16. Sarva dharman parityajam mamekam sharanam vraja. In the spiritual world, every living entity is surrendered to the Supreme Lord and is completely on the spiritual platform. Although there are servitors and served and service, all are spiritual and variegated. At the present moment, due to our material conception, everything is durvibhavya, inconceivable. Being the Supreme, the Lord is called Rishabha, the best. In terms of the Vedic language, Nitya Nityanam, we are also spiritual, but we are subordinate. Krishna, the Supreme Lord, is the foremost living entity. The word Rishabha means the chief or the supreme and indicates the supreme being or God himself. Verse again, Idam sharira mama durvibhavyam satvam hime hridayam yattadharma prishte krito me yattadharma arat ato himam rishabha prahu araya. Aryaha, not araya. Translation. My transcendental body Sachitananda Vigraha looks exactly like a human form, but it is not a material human body. It is inconceivable. I am not forced by nature to accept a particular type of body. I take on a body by my own sweet will. My heart is also spiritual, and I always think of the welfare of my devotees. Therefore, within my heart can be found the process of devotional service, which is meant for the devotees. Far from my heart have I abandoned irreligion, adharma, and non-devotional activities. They do not appeal to me. Due to all these transcendental qualities, people generally pray to me as Rishabhadeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the best of all living entities. Okay. Om Jnana Timirandasya Yanandana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Asmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayarupa Kadamahyam Padati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajitam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Sabda Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubheva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So good morning devotees. Today we continue in the beautiful chapter and Lord Rishabhadeva gives us a lot of transcendental knowledge and instructions that applies not only to his sons but to all of us. And in this particular verse, he explains this, and Prabhupada stresses this twice in purport, Durvi Bhavyam, that inconceivable nature of the Lord's body, or anything about the Lord is inconceivable. You know, for example, we chant in the holy name, and by chanting the holy name, it's actually non different to the form of the Lord. So this is one of the most inconceivable tattvas that people struggle to understand, and that's why it's one of the offenses to the holy name to explain the confidential truths about the Lord to the materialists, to the non-devotees. And this is exactly what it says here in the purport, that those who are materialists, mundane persons, they don't understand. They will not understand. I remember we were sitting in a class, Lord Chaitanya pastimes, Chaitanya Charitamrita class, and it came time for question, and there were a few new people in the temple room, and let's put it this way: a few new devotees interested in bhakti. And one of those new persons, he asked, "So, if the Lord's body is transcendental, why it is bleeding? Why, when Lord Nityananda was hit by the pot, Jagai Madhai, when they attacked Lord Nityananda, why he was bleeding? If his body is transcendental?" And you know, all of a sudden, all of those new devotees, including myself, were shocked. Oh my goodness, good question, right? Maybe Lord Nityananda is not Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why is bleeding if his body is Satchitananda Vigraha, full of bliss, eternity, and knowledge? And the lecturer was answering that this is different kind of blood, and it's part of the pastime, and uh, it's supposed to be a drama in the pastime, and Lord can do whatever he likes, and it's also part of the bewilderment to the conditioned souls like us. So we get distracted by this, and all of those different arguments were given. But what was interesting is to examine your own heart, how much nishtha you have, how much you're convinced just by the words of Shastra, uh, rather than by your sense perception and your mind and intelligence, which are material, because you're trying to understand the spiritual truths by your material senses, including mind and intelligence and false ego. So that was an interesting test. It reminded me that when I was 13, I decided to be closer to God. And so I went to the church. I asked my parents so I can be baptized. And so I came to you know, to the ceremony of initiation into Christianity. And the priest, there's an important moment. The priest asks you, "Do you believe in God, oh my son?" And I was always trying to be honest, you know. And so when the priest asked me the question, I answered, "Well, about 60%." Can you imagine during the ceremony, you know, there are people. It's not just me, priest, and, and my mother, the godmother. And he was so confused. This priest almost lost his kind of senses at that point. Like he didn't know what to do, you know. He didn't expect that answer. So so he waited, and then he said again, "Do you believe in God, my son?" And my godmother, she was leaning towards my ear because she was standing behind me. And she said, "You have to answer yes." And to relieve the pressure, I said yes. And so we continued, you know, holy water and all that. Anyway, um, so in other words, I had some doubts, but it was more yes than no. You know, 60% is more than doubts than no. So, but this is exactly what this is the uh, testimony of us being conditioned. You know, Prabhupada says here we have some experience of the material energy, earth, water, air, fire, ether, mind, intelligence, ego. And um, that we can understand, that we can perceive, sorry. And I remember when I traveled to Cook Islands in New Zealand, like the tropical islands, which is part of New Zealand. It's a very small island, 32 kilometers in radius. And I remember my first realization about material energy was there, very prominent. I was standing on a seashore, and as I said, the land in diameter, this island is so small, 32 kilometers, like I don't know what, 20 miles. You can walk around it in one day, you know, just walk. And I was standing there, my feet were in an ocean, in the water. Like the water was up to my knees. Well, very warm water. The climate is very nice, like Hawaii. So the breeze was blowing, and the sun was setting. And at that moment, and there was some music playing in the background, because you know it's like pretty much it's like a honeymoon place. You know, I was the only person who came alone. You know, everybody had a spouse, a couple, honeymoon, whatever. I went to explore jungles in this island. And so I was standing there and I felt the presence of those five material elements. And I had this understanding of how interesting it is to experience a sun energy, water energy, air energy, and earth energy, and ether energy at the same time. So when I had this experience, I was like, I was trying to understand how it affects my body, how I'm experiencing all those five energies, very strong energies at the same time, how they are condensed. You know, like usually when we walk in a city, we can experience some dirty air and some noise. You know, we walk on earth, okay. Sometimes we're swimming in a swimming pool, so we experience in water. And it's a different bodily experience also because your skin is touching something more liquid and, you know, like when you fully absorb, when you especially swimming or diving underneath, snorkeling or whatever. So it's like different experiences, but at that point, I experiences all of those five, and in its very pure state, you know, very nice sunset and fresh air, and you know, the water was very warm. So like this. So yes, we can experience all those material energies, even our mind and intelligence by the process of with having a knowledge, we can understand even those subtle forms, like mind always want and not want something. Intelligence tells you, hey, this is not very intelligent to have the fifth ice cream because you're going to get sick. So we can understand, we can even just using our material senses understand this. And even the false ego, we can understand basically by using the logic neti and understand that we can identify with some profession or some bodily designation. I'm the father, those things. We can understand it's actually false ego, because before I was not a father, but I was still me. It was still me. So these things we can understand. Prabhupada says here, we can. But when it comes to the spiritual energy and the body made of a spiritual energy, this is something that our system cannot compute. For that, we need the transcendental knowledge. We need those realizations, vijnana. We need to get this understanding on a level of a soul, on a level that starts from Brahmabhuta, Prasanatmana Shochachina Kankshati. From that level, devotional service starts. We need, and so that experience comes through actual devotional service. When although we are conditioned by material senses, yet by being engaged in devotional service properly under guidance and etc., we may experience a spiritual bliss, and that is also an experience. But this is not an experience of material senses. This is an experience of a spirit soul. And that satisfaction that comes from that experience, it has the highest form or the highest taste, as we like to say, or the nectar, the jargon that we use in English. That experience, that is an experience by soul, is like a revelation. It's like you all of a sudden understand something beyond the matter, and it's so strong and so prominent by mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because we cannot reach that level, Brahma Bhuta Prasamatma. It's so difficult. But by mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we experiencing the love of Godhead through devotional service, even though our senses are not yet purified, even though we're not yet on that transcendental platform. And that's an inconceivable, absolutely inconceivable also process. How come we experiencing sometimes a tinge of love of God, the shade of the drop of the reflection? And we have that experience. We remember that. Every single one of you have that experience. And not only have it, you remember that experience. So every time you come back to that experience, it feeds you, it rejuvenates your memory, your consciousness, your Krishna consciousness. So that's why when we just had this experience again with a devotee whose senses are purified, who is very dear to the Lord, who is already on that platform when he's like an iron rod, which is fire, meaning his senses got so purified in the service to the Lord that by just his presence, he can ignite the Krishna consciousness. He doesn't even have to speak. He has to be just present, That's why memories of Prabhupada disciples were like, Prabhupada was drinking water and we were getting Krishna consciousness, just by seeing how Prabhupada drinks water, or twist a coin, or, just this ordinary thing, because it's Srila Prabhupada who's completely absorbed in smaranam, in remembering the Lord and acting to please the Lord all the time with his body, mind, and senses, and intelligence, with everything. And that's why just being in presence of such person, whatever he speaks about, you get purified. You get in Krishna consciousness. So I had, and most of you, I'm sure, had this experience now with Radha Maharaj coming, that this was like this, just by being with us 4 days, our level of consciousness, or Krishna consciousness, has raised immensely. We have all experienced satisfaction, bliss, Krishna Trishna. We experienced a thirst for Krishna. Our chanting became better, sweeter. at least the desire invoked to have the chanting better and sweeter, to do it in a proper morning time like this. Maharaj came in 4 days. He came 3 times for Mangalarti, and just by his presence, it was so uplifting. He chanted with us for 1 hour. He gave classes. He spent time giving darshans, personal darshans. He was completely giving himself out to everyone here. And such persons are so dear to the Lord. So when Prabhupada continues this purport saying that we have that the Lord, the text itself first. Therefore, within my heart can be found the process of devotional service, which is meant for the devotees. Far from my heart, I abandoned religion, dharma, and non-devotional activities. They do not appeal to me. So we have to understand what devotional service is, because if it's in the heart of the Lord, if it's dear to the Lord, we may as well start trying to perform that devotional service. So we become in the heart of the Lord. We want to become aspiring devotees. And sometimes devotees asking, how do I know that Krishna is pleased with me? Well, one can read Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, and understand what Krishna is pleased with. It's still part of those 6 important chapters in Bhagavad Gita that are describing pure devotional service. And chapter 12 is one of them. And there exactly from verse 13 onwards, Shri Krishna says, who is dear to him? He finishes pretty much every sentence in a similar way. The Priyasime, in one sentence he says, Muktoya sacha me priya. Another says, Bhaktiman priyasime. Yomad bhakta same priya. Bhaktiman yasame priya. Priya means dear to me. So let me just read those verses, just the translations, so we can understand how are we supposed to behave like something to aspire for that becomes pleasing and dear to the Lord. In this way, we have this question result. What is pleasing to Krishna? Pleasing to Krishna is that behavior. So hear it, please. One who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me. Such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. He by whom no one is put into difficulty, and who is not disturbed by anyone, who is equipoised in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, is very dear to me. My devotee who is not dependent on the ordinary course of activities, who is pure, expert, without cares, free from all pains, and not striving for some result, is very dear to me. One who neither rejoices nor grieves, who neither laments nor desires, and who renounces both auspiciousness and inauspicious things. Such a devotee is very dear to me. One who is equal to friends and enemies, who is equipoised in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy, who is always free from contaminating association, always silent and satisfied with anything, who doesn't care for any residence, who is fixed in knowledge and who is engaged in devotional service. Such a person is very dear to me. In the last verse 20. Those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engage themselves with faith, making me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me. Very exalted statements, some of them seems to be never reachable, so high. All this just Bhagavad Gita, but we call it sometimes preliminary study. But if you just study those verses, you can understand how high it is. It's not preliminary, doesn't mean inferior. Preliminary means foundation. It's a basic, but it's like a foundation on which everything is built. And But at least we can try for something, you know. Some things are very, very high here, but some are, you know, kind of at least within our, if we meditate on these, we can actually implement it. For example, to stay away from the contaminated association. That's actually in our power. It's not something that is unreachable, it's impossible. No, it's possible. It's possible because I decide how I want to associate, whether it's damaging my Krishna consciousness or not damaging, right? Nectar of instruction. It says, Janasanga, and like this. We can reject that. The things that are disturbing or destroying, it says vinasha, destroying our Krishna consciousness. We have to protect it as a gardener protects its garden. So, but still, I just wanted to point out your attention to this because Lord says who is dear to him as a devotee, and devotional service lives in his heart. And he says also that he lives in the heart of every living entity, right? Suhridam sarvabhutanam. Hridasha. In a heart he lives, and he is very dear friend to every living entity. So Lord is, he wants us to come to him also. It's not only we need to want to come to him and keep that goal in mind. No, Lord also wants that. And because he wants it, because it's dear to him, he will encourage and help us. Like with this mercy that we just got, the causeless mercy of spontaneous visit of His Holiness Radhanath Swami, Grace Rajalila Devi, she was saying that it's the causeless mercy of Radha Damodar, Lalita Vishakti Tagore Sundar, because they were merciful to all of us, to the whole community of devotees. They navigated his pure devotee to come. And this is Shastra. This is not just her realization, it's Shastra. Because you remember in fourth canto, which we read last year, when Maharaj Prithu managed to satisfy the Lord through yagya. Our yagya is not fire yagya. Here we chant holy names for the pleasure of Radha Damodar. We dress them nicely, feed them nicely, and you know, trying to serve them, you know, with time, with cleanliness and timeliness and all those things, Pancharatra. Trying to do our best, and somehow they got pleased, and they sent in the rains, and you know, they provided everything. But also the greatest benediction or the best gift is association of devotees. So Lord Vishnu said to Prithu Maharaj, I'm so pleased with you. Soon the devotees, my pure devotees will come to your house. They will illuminate your house by their presence. And when four Kumaras came, Lord Prithu understood the prediction, not just prediction, the desire of the Lord, and his foretelling come to truth. He was crying, he was paying obeisance, he was serving those four Kumaras the best way he could, you know, putting them on his throne and personally serving them and glorifying and praising them. That's what we're supposed to do when such devotees come in, because Brahmana will not come to a place, and what to speak of devotee, even Brahmana will not come to a place when he is not honored properly. Because if there's no honor, that means I have nothing to give, because they will not listen. How can you listen without honor? Without respect? If you don't respect somebody, you will not listen. I knew it. What can this person say? And we are limiting ourselves. Immediately we're closing the opportunity for us to absorb Krishna consciousness. And that's why it's so important to understand that we don't know who is a Vaishnava actually. In other words, we should respect everyone. But of course, even much more so, we should respect those who have dedicated their whole lives to spreading the Krishna consciousness. And this is the first offense against the holy name. If you dishonor, if you disrespect, if you blaspheme, if more to that, if you blaspheme such devotees who have dedicated, it's in that first offense, it's actually, sometimes it's written in a short way, but actually it says the ones who have dedicated their whole life. In other words, it's very exalted Vaishnavas. So for them, especially, never, ever allow any blasphemy towards such devotees. You will ruin your spiritual life immediately. So So this is, those are the points I wanted to make, that when such devotees come, this is causeless mercy, and it can ignite our spiritual, like revive our spiritual path or spiritual practice very quickly if we use the opportunity. While he was present here, we had only limited time of the day when we could associate. So we should have grabbed all the opportunity. One of his disciples who came here, she couldn't wake up one morning because it was cold and she was tired. But her spiritual master came to Mangalarti, and it was just four of us with Pujari, with Maharaj, and she missed the opportunity to be with, and it was actually her dream to be with her spiritual master, to chant. So she was lamenting so badly the next day. And that day, Maharaj is supposed to leave. But somehow or other, he stayed one more day. And next morning, she didn't know whether he will come or not, but she was here at 4 o'clock, waiting. Well, not waiting for Maharaj. She was just, wanted to rectify her mistake, and she was praying to the deities. And at some point, Mangalarti Maharaj comes in, and I was just given the flower to devotees. So I gave it to Maharaj, I gave it to devotees, and I came to her and I gave it to her hand and I said, "You won the lottery." So I dropped the flower in her hand. She turns around and she sees her spiritual master, pays a base and says, and her happiness had no boundary, and she just became so joyful. It was a sweet reward for that lamentation and tears that she shed. So, but my point is that we never can return those moments. So when we have that opportunity, we should use every single opportunity to associate. Otherwise, we're losing the opportunity to be Krishna consciousness, to serve, to interact with such devotees is so rare. After lecture, Srimad Bhagavatam class that Maharaj gave, I came to him and said, "Maharaj, I haven't seen you in person for 10 years. Last time I heard your Srimad Bhagavatam class in person was 2013. Bhakti Sangam Festival, Ukraine." And I said, "I don't know when the next opportunity will be, My question is what we can do better so you can stay a little longer, It's our greed, laulyam, spiritual greed to be Krishna consciousness. You've given this us. Please be merciful." Anyway, so I kind of lost my thought where I was leading with this. And the time is running out. So maybe I can open the time now for contributions and questions. If anyone has any thoughts, check chat.
I have lots of thoughts.
Oh, Tarek Prabhu, yes, please. Lots of thoughts.
There's probably not time for all my thoughts, but I want to thank you for a very nice, enlivening, and inspiring class. That was really nice meditation. I particularly enjoyed discussion of Krishna's words from Bhagavad Gita describing those devotees that are pleasing to him. That's a very nice meditation. It's something to think about, to aspire towards. And while hearing that, I was thinking that I can speak for myself, but it's probably true for some others. Such advanced souls, perhaps everyone is on that platform of being character that they are very pleasing to Krishna. For myself, I think, well, some of these characteristics are not so easy to attain. Even after, many years of practicing Krishna, I just look at myself and I think, well, I've some incremental progress towards this characteristic or that, but not fully there yet. And so my thought was, I keep thinking of Srila Prabhupada's instructions to us, what he repeated so very often, was that to please Krishna is difficult. It's not very easy to try to please Krishna, but you can please Krishna very easily by pleasing his pure devotee. And our whole process actually is, we approach Krishna and render service to Krishna, attempt to please Krishna by initiation into the Guru Parampara. Take initiation from a spiritual master and we serve him. Srila Prabhupada explains in so many places again and again that if you can please your spiritual master, that your mission of life is complete, it is successful. Devotees would sometimes ask Srila Prabhupada, how do we know if we have pleased Krishna? And Srila Prabhupada would say, you will know that Krishna is pleased when your spiritual master is pleased. If you can please your spiritual master, then you can know for sure and certain that automatically Krishna will be pleased. So trying to please the spiritual master, that may also be challenging sometimes, but it's a more easily attainable goal. If we want to please our spiritual master, the first thing is to understand what will please him. We can ask him directly, how can I please you? Tell you very simply. But the basic principle is that to please the spiritual master, you have to follow his instruction. At least you have to follow his instructions. Certainly not going to be pleased if you are not sincere enough to endeavor to follow his instructions. So that's the beginning. But it can also be the end, just simply to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. That's very pleasing. Srila Prabhupada's service to his own spiritual master, as far as Srila Prabhupada was concerned, was primarily the production of his books. And Srila Prabhupada was also extremely pleased with anyone who assisted him in his service to his own spiritual master. So those who were distributing his books and helping to make them available, Srila Prabhupada was very pleased with them. In the first talk that Radhanath Swami gave, he made mention of Bhakti Tirtha Swami. Communist countries taking terrible risks to try to get books into universities and libraries. And maybe not everyone is familiar with those stories. It was a very big deal back in the day. Those adventures were narrated in the Sankirtan newsletters that would be published weekly by the BBT, and all the devotees would read and hear the Sankirtan newsletters whenever everyone was familiar with those stories, and they were quite extraordinary. I witnessed Srila Prabhupada hearing I think it was Rameshwar Prabhu was reading the Sankirtan newsletter to Srila Prabhupada and had an extraordinary narration of Bhakti Tirtha Swami performing some extraordinary feats in some communist country, which was quite dangerous for him to be in. He was not even supposed to be there. He was there illegally and entered some university campus illegally. And at some point, the security detected him and they chased him, and he had to vault over a wall to evade capture. Watching Srila Prabhupada hear this narration was an incredible experience. Just fixed and rapt attention, and with huge eyes like Lord Jagannath. He was listening to this narration and leaning over and draw a gape and just awestruck, and so later, and Radhanath Swami narrated the instance of Bhakti-Tirtha Swami meeting Srila Prabhupada in London when Srila Prabhupada was attempting to come here to Gita Nagari. And it was the first opportunity that Srila Prabhupada had gotten to see Bhakti-Tirtha Swami since that time. And he was, Bhakti-Tirtha Swami was regularly sending letters to him on a weekly basis, updates of his progress. So when Srila Prabhupada finally saw Bhakti-Tirtha Swami in person, he immediately got up and rushed to greet him, and just threw his arms around Bhakti-Tirtha Swami and embraced him tightly and held him for a long time. Told him that your mission of life is successful, because Srila Prabhupada was so very, very pleased with his endeavor. This is what we aspire for, that somehow or other we can please our spiritual master. That's an attainable goal. So we should find out how we can please our spiritual master. We can do that easily by asking, or otherwise there are general directions. But the spiritual master gives so many instructions, general instructions meant for everyone, and sometimes specific instructions for a particular individual. So by following strictly those instructions, that will please the spiritual master. Those were some of my thoughts, and stop because it's after 8 o'clock and we're out of time. Thank you again, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Tark Prabhu. Yes, I totally agree. This is the essence, the most important way to understand, and the best way to please is serving the instructions of a spiritual master. Serving meaning following them, and by offering such service, one can really please. And yeah, there are so many examples and testimonies to that in Shastra, as well as in Shastra, both Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, we could see how Ishvara Puri pleased Madhavendra Puri, and how, on contrary, what do you call him? I always forget his name. Ramachandra Puri, who displeased his spiritual master and got the opposite effect, became a blasphemer and cynical, criticizing and following, basically deviating from the path of bhakti steadily with those offenses that he committed. And on the contrary, Ishvara Puri was the one who took all that love of Godhead that Madhavendra Puri had and continued that parampara. So, and they had Krishna. So, 100% Thakur Prabhu. Thank you for pointing this out. We should always point this out. So I'm very happy that you did that. We all speak about it so often that, today I just decided to give one more angle, but I think this angle, because it's a trunk, it's a root, it's the main thing. And like this saying, the main thing is to have the main thing, right? So to keep the main thing, that's the main thing. So we should always meditate on this and never forget that point that you brought up, and we should always mention that. So I hear the bell. The bhog is offered now. So I think we can Guru Puja first. Okay. All right. So we're starting with Guru Puja. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Guru Charana Parma Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Chitinani Namaha Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shri Krishna Chaitanya सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। आचार्य श्री हरदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरि गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपिनाथ श्यामकुंड राधाकुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय। नथुरा धाम की जय। नवद्वीप धाम की जय। जगन्नाथपुर धाम की जय। गंगमय मुनिमय की जय। तुलसी देवी भक्ति देवी की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। हरि को प्रणवंदे। All glorious and simple devotees. Glorious and simple devotees. All glorious and simple devotees. Hare Krishna. All glorious and simple devotees. I think greater than God, also spirit prosperity, made the earth. My own relationship now is moving to purify and the relationship. Passion and glorification, perfection and responsibility. You also find that made my Lord reference from whom it says, from whom that he is the very simple thing that how to work. I am the Lord, one of the all I can do is
Devotees,